Hello and welcome to part 2 of our continuing series on Stephen Mitchell's translation of the Dao De Jing, the great ancient Chinese wisdom classic. Like I said, in the Stephen Mitchell translation from HarperCollins, pick up your copy. This is an essential part of every home library, no matter how small that library is, a true keeper that it only takes about a half hour to read this whole book, and you can just read it over and over and over for decades. And every time you return to it, it contains passages that you swear you've never seen before. It's really something. And that's why I'm taking the time to go through in these videos a close reading of not every single chapter, and again, by chapter I mean simply poem. Here's chapter 14 and 15. Not every single one, but a lot of them, because there are hidden facets on each one that simply reveal themselves upon reflection, and that's what's so continually perennially fascinating about the Dao De Jing. So I'm going to pick up on chapter 15. So here's chapter 15, one of my favorite chapters. And I promised myself I wasn't going to say that, darn it, because there's 81 chapters and they're all my favorite. But I really go back to this one all the time. And let's get into it, and then I'll back up and we'll look at certain passages of it a little more closely. Chapter 15. The ancient masters were profound and subtle. Their wisdom was unfathomable. There is no way to describe it. All we can describe is their appearance. So there's that idea again that, like the opening line that we discussed last time, the Tao that can be told is not the eternal Tao. So now he says, well, let's look at what wise people do. The ancient masters, these examples of wisdom. Since they can't tell us what they know, and no matter how clever they are, you can't put that kind of wisdom into words. Let's just see how they act. Let's see how they show up in the world, and maybe from their movements, from their behaviors, maybe you and I can glean something of their wisdom. That's the setup. Okay. Now he goes on. So he says, basically, all we can describe is their appearance. So here's how wise people appear. They were careful as someone crossing an iced over stream, alert as a warrior in enemy territory, courteous as a guest, fluid as melting ice, shapeable as a block of wood, receptive as a valley, clear as a glass of water. So he gives you a list of qualities. Have you ever walked over ice? I live here in Southern California, and I don't see much of this stuff myself, but I have traveled to cold places and tried to walk on ice. And there's a certain way you walk. You don't just go scrambling ahead. You keep your body weight centered over your feet. You take shorter steps. You pay attention. Alert as a warrior in enemy territory. Again, listening more than you're speaking. Focused in the present moment, not lost in thoughts of future, not lost in thoughts of past. These are each one of these examples in chapter 15 of the way wise people appear or the way they move through the world. Telegraphs a huge message about what wisdom is. And then he closes out chapter 15 like this. Do you have the patience to wait till your mud settles and the water is clear? Can you remain unmoving till the right action arises by itself? The master doesn't seek fulfillment, not seeking, not expecting. She is present and can welcome all things. I love that image. Do you have the patience to wait till your mud settles and the water is clear? Again, imagine if there was dirt, a spoonful of dirt in this water, and I stirred it up and the water would be all muddy. How do I clear the water? Do I keep stirring? No, you stop stirring and you wait? Do you have the patience to wait until your mud settles and the water becomes clear? What a powerful message about wu wei. Again, not doing. That sometimes the best solution is to leave things alone for a little while. This is not counseling us to withdraw and never do anything and procrastinate and avoid. That is not the message of the Dao De Jing. Procrastinate and avoid your way to wisdom. Instead, it is recognize that, let me put it in terms of myself. I know that when I have a problem, when I stumble upon a problem, I usually just keep stirring and agitating and I never have any clarity. Sometimes I've gotten smarter about this. Sometimes when I have a problem, I'll just wait for 3 days and do nothing. And I'll be damned if most of the time the problem just doesn't just dissolve. Just new conditions arise, as they always are, and the quote-unquote problem takes care of itself, or at least I have new eyes with which to see the problem, and the solutions just easily reveal themselves. That was chapter 15. That's a good one. Chapter 17. Let me jump over. He's going to start talking about politics, and that's one of the interesting themes of the Dao De Jing. And many commentators have pointed out that there's a kind of a political science vibe. There's a little bit of advice here about government that comes up in sometimes tangential ways, sometimes direct ways. I think chapter 17 is pretty direct. It goes like this. When the master governs, the people are hardly aware that he exists. Next best is a leader who is loved. Next, one who is feared. The worst is one who is despised. And this goes to governing your own family as well. Think about your role as a parent, if you are a parent. That the best parents, the people are hardly aware that he's or she's in charge. And the next best are the ones who are loved, and the third best are the ones who are feared, and the fourth best or the worst are the ones who are despised. Think about all the bosses you've had in your life, right? Lao Tzu goes on, if you don't trust the people, you make them untrustworthy. The master doesn't talk, he acts. When his work is done, the people say, amazing, we did it all by ourselves. So there's sort of this leadership by being a servant. Servant leader. We hear that phrase a lot these days. To be a servant leader. Not to get up like a tyrant barking orders, micromanaging everything. But instead to bring in a good team of people and say, what can I do to help you do your work? How can I remove obstacles so that your own creativity and ambition and joy can work in collaboration with the other people on the team to co-create the results that we're all trying to envision and manifest? The Tao of leadership is a very fertile story indeed. Chapter 18. This one's full of paradox. We're going to have to unpack it. Chapter 18, it isn't very long though. It says, when the great Tao is forgotten, goodness and piety appear. When the body's intelligence declines, cleverness and knowledge step forth. When there is no peace in the family, filial piety begins. When a country falls into chaos, patriotism is born. I don't know if you can hear it, but these lines are dripping with sarcasm. When the great Tao is forgotten, goodness and piety appear. When people start prattling on about the goodness and about being good and pious, religiously good and pure and all that stuff, that we've lost track. You know that we've lost our natural innate goodness. Taoism is always counseling us to go back to our natural cooperativeness, our natural compassion, our natural empathy. Get out of the way of that. Let that naturally pour forth. Whenever people start imposing to-do lists and rules, you know you're in trouble. When there is no peace in the family, filial piety begins. I think Taoists are directly poking fun at Confucius here, at Confucianism, which holds in very high regard the idea of filial piety, which is sort of a strange English translation of, reverence for one's ancestors, almost a religiously pious attitude toward one's ancestors, forcing you to love people. And Taoism says, that's a second tier activity. The higher ideal would be just having genuine warmth in your family. Then people would automatically act respectfully. Yeah. Jumping down to 19 now. It's another chapter full of the kind of paradox we were just discussing. And I think with a kind of, I don't know, this sounds funny to me. Let me see how it hits you. This sounds like jokes almost. Throw away holiness and wisdom, and people will be 100 times happier. Throw away morality and justice, and people will do the right thing. Throw away industry and profit, and there won't be any thieves. If these three aren't enough, just stay at the center of the circle and let all things take their course. So again, I think Lao Tzu and the Taoists are pushing back against forced morality, forced holiness. If you just sort of got all that stuff out of the way, people's natural, spontaneous kindness would emerge. Look, one could be critical of Taoism on this point. Are they too romantic here? Are they too naive? Are the Taoists assuming that if you just got rid of regulations, people would just naturally do the right thing? That sounds a little like a fantasy, doesn't it? So take these with a grain of salt as philosophical musings, because that's what they are. This isn't, a constitution for a country. This is not an actual legal or political proposal. I believe, I would suggest these are philosophical provocations that does our rigorous attempt to control everything actually create chaos. Jumping down to chapter 21. The master keeps her mind always at one with the Tao. That is what gives her radiance. The Tao is ungraspable. How can her mind be at one with it? Because she doesn't cling to ideas. The Tao is dark and unfathomable. How can it make her radiant? Because she lets it. Since before time and space were, the Tao is. It is beyond is and is not. How do I know this is true? I look inside myself and see. Boy, this is classic world mysticism. That in the great classical text of from the UK of Christian mysticism called The Cloud of Unknowing, the unknown author there talks about if you're trying to get to God, you have to sort of forget everything you know and then throw yourself into the cloud of unknowing. And just as Lao Tzu just wrote, that Tao is beyond is and is not. It's beyond all the categories of existence and non-existence, being and non-being, is and is not. Beyond all binaries, beyond all dualities, beyond all concepts. Mystery wrapped in mystery, right? Let's jump to chapter 23. Express yourself completely, then keep quiet. Be like the forces of nature. When it blows, there is only wind. When it rains, there is only rain. When the clouds pass, the sun shines through. Other translations say it like this: a storm does not last all morning. To go on here, if you open yourself to the Tao, you are at one with the Tao, and you can embody it completely. If you open yourself to insight, you are at one with insight, and you can use it completely. If you open yourself to loss, you are at one with loss, and you can accept it completely. Open yourself to the Tao, then trust your natural responses, and everything will fall into place. A lot of beautiful stuff here about openness and about making room, about making space. I'm reminded of that great guided meditation from the wonderful Zen Buddhist teacher Thich Nhat Hanh, who his students simply know as Te, or teacher. And when Thich Nhat Hanh leads guided meditation, sometimes he uses this. He says, on the first breath, you simply say silently within yourself, letting go. And on the next breath, being here. And on the third breath, opening up. Letting go, being here, opening up. That sense of openness is what is the theme of chapter 23 of the Dao De Jing. Going to chapter 24. This is a cute one too. It's so simple and direct, almost childlike in its clarity, but like all the other chapters, bottomlessly deep. Chapter 24. He who stands on tiptoe doesn't stand firm. He who rushes ahead doesn't go far. He who tries to shine dims his own light. He who defines himself can't know who he really is. He who has power over others can't empower himself. He who clings to his work will create nothing that endures. If you want to accord with the Tao, just do your job, then let go. Again, that Gandhi idea. It is for us to do the work, but the results are always in God's hands. Or throughout the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna telling Arjuna, you have the right to work, but you do not have the right to the fruits, the phala, the fruits of work, the results of work. In other words, to work without attachment to outcomes, to let go. It's all through the Taoist wisdom literature. Jumping now to chapter 27. This is another sweet one. This sounds like a lot of fortune cookies. Fortune cookies used to be amazing here in American Chinese restaurants. They were fun. They had actually bits from the Dao De Jing in them. Now I got a fortune cookie the other day from some Chinese takeout place. And I opened it up and the fortune said, "You are pretty." I went, wow. The fortune cookie literature has really declined lately because it used to be stuff like this. Check out these. Chapter 27. A good traveler has no fixed plans and is not intent upon arriving. A good artist lets his intuition lead him wherever it wants. A good scientist has freed himself of concepts and keeps his mind open to what is. So 3 examples of, again, working without attachment to outcomes. Leaving enough openness so that you can feel yourself being led by whatever word you want to put in here. God, grace, Tao, intuition. To go on with chapter 27. Thus the master is available to all people and doesn't reject anyone. He is ready to use all situations and doesn't waste anything. This is called embodying the light. Chapter 27 is amazing. Let me jump over to chapter 30. Now we're getting into some more stuff about a little bit about government and politics, and maybe even the role of military force in chapters 30 and 31. Chapter 30. Whoever relies on the Tao in governing men doesn't try to force issues or defeat enemies by force of arms. For every force, there is a counterforce. Violence, even well-intentioned, always rebounds upon oneself. The master does his job and then stops. He understands that the universe is forever out of control, and that trying to dominate events goes against the current of the Tao. Because he believes in himself, he doesn't try to convince others. Because he is content with himself, he doesn't need others' approval. Because he accepts himself, the whole world accepts him. And verse 31, weapons are the tools of violence. All decent men detest them. Weapons are the tools of fear, and decent men will avoid them, except in the direst necessity. And if compelled, will use them only with the utmost restraint. Peace is his highest value. If the peace has been shattered, how can he be content? His enemies are not demons, but human beings like himself. He doesn't wish them personal harm. Nor does he rejoice in victory. How could he rejoice in victory and delight in the slaughter of men? He enters a battle gravely, with sorrow and with great compassion, as if he were attending a funeral. You know, I've had the great honor and privilege as a professor at a community college here in San Diego to work with a lot of returning combat veterans. And they have taught me so much. And in my office, in private conversation with combat Marines, say, who came back from Afghanistan, the ones who've really, I'm just going to sort of say it, the ones who have killed and held their dying friends in their arms as they've died, they don't celebrate victory. They don't rejoice in battle. And they understand that the quote-unquote enemy that they killed is just a young kid like themselves fighting for their village, following the orders of their elders. They bear no malice to their combatant enemies. And I've talked to so many Marines who, when they get home from the war, they get rid of all their guns. That's the last thing they ever want to do, is hold a gun again. That it is a tool like a hammer or a screwdriver or whatever, but you don't put it on and parade it around in a Starbucks as if it were all just some sort of silly joke. The gravitas of these war passages is stunning. This is no simplistic pacifism. There is the full acknowledgement that in certain exceptional cases, violence is necessary. But it is entered into with compassion for one's opponent, and with great reluctance, and with resignation and acceptance, but also with a soft grip. And that when it's over, and the weapons get put away. And to not stay there in battle consciousness. So let me pause there and leave off with those two powerful chapters. So this ends episode 2 of our study of the Tao Te Ching. Join me in episode 3, where we pick up right where we left off and keep moving through these powerful, potentially life-changing teachings. See you on the other side.